There are over 700,000 sexual offenders in the United States alone. With all the social media these days, how can we protect ourselves and our children from these despicable predators?
Welcome to the Voice of the Victim podcast, where we discuss criminal cases that involve some factor of abuse. Our goal is to spread awareness of abuse that could be taking place around any of us and encourage everyone to take responsibility and report if they see a child or an adult being abused. It was 10:37 in the morning, April 19th, 2008. Police in Amstetten, Austria received a call from the Mostviertel Amstetten State Hospital saying they had a mysterious female in their care. She was unresponsive and close to death. She seemed to be suffering from extreme neglect. Her concerned grandfather had brought her there after he found her at his house, leaning against a wall and carrying a note. The note was from her mother, who had disappeared 24 years earlier. It stated that this was her eldest daughter and that she needed medical attention that she could not afford. This was the fourth time the mother, Elisabeth, had abandoned her child at the house of her parents, Josef and Rosemarie Fritzl. 24 years earlier, she had run away to join a cult and cut ties with her family. What kind of mother would keep abandoning her children in this way? Alright. Well, this case is a doozy. But I don't want to spoil too much, so let's just get into it. Elisabeth was born in 1966, one of 7 children of Josef and Rosemarie Fritzl. She was known by her friends to be very shy when it came to talking about life outside of school, especially boys and sex. At age 15, she began a course to become a waitress, and then in 1983, at age 17, she ran away from home and she was gone for 3 weeks, but they found her at a friend's place in Vienna. She returned and finished her waitressing course, and then she was offered a job in 1984 in Linz. At age 18, she ran away from home again, but this time she sent a letter. She said she was tired of living with her family and was staying with a friend. She also said that if her parents looked for her, she would leave the country. Josef gave the letter to the police saying that she probably joined some religious cult. Over the years, Elisabeth abandoned 3 children on the doorstep of Josef and Rosemarie's house. Josef and Rosemarie kindly took in the children and they became part of the family. But the 4th one she left was no child. This was a 19-year-old woman, severely neglected and malnourished. Well, let's return to the beginning of the story, where we're talking about the girl, the mysterious girl in the hospital. This was April 19th, 2008, when she arrived. And didn't you say she had a note on her?
She had a note that was hidden in her clothes that was begging for help from her mother.
And they had no way to find the mother, so there was really nothing they could do with this note. But 1 week later, on April 26th, Elisabeth, the girl's mother, showed up to the hospital with her father, Josef. Police were tipped off that the mother of this mystery girl had arrived, and they showed up to question her. As they interrogated her, she was hesitant to tell them why she abandoned so many children. But she told the police she would tell them everything if they could do her one favor. She made them promise that she would never have to see her father again. What she told the police next was shocking and unbelievable.
The hospital did put out a TV appeal to try to find the mother after they found the hidden note.
Okay.
Trying to locate her.
Well, you ready to talk about what really happened? So, when Elisabeth was 18, the day she quote-unquote disappeared, her father, Josef, was finishing up work on an addition to the family's home. It was a new cellar that he was making to be his workspace, and he needed help carrying a door down to the basement. It was the last piece of the new cellar. So Elisabeth helped him carry it down, and she held it in place as he fitted it into the frame. But suddenly Elisabeth's face was covered with an ether-soaked rag, and she began to lose consciousness. Ether or diethyl ether is a colorless but highly volatile flammable liquid, and in the past it was used as an anesthetic before non-flammable anesthetics were created. So when she woke up from this, she was in a dark chamber with no windows, and her father would visit her in the chamber about every 3 days to bring her food and other supplies, but that wasn't all he did. On these visits, her father Joseph would rape her. And over the next 24 years, she gave birth to 7 children because of the repeated rapes.
In November of 1986, Elisabeth miscarried on the 10th week of her pregnancy. On August 1988, Kirsten was born. She was the oldest child and the one that was horribly sick and in the hospital at the beginning of the podcast. In February 1990, Stefan was born. He also stayed in the cellar until 2008 when they were all released. In August 1992, Lisa is born. When she was 9 months old, she was found at Fritzl's front door with a note asking that she be cared for. But Elisabeth wasn't the one leaving them there. Joseph would force Elisabeth to write the letters of abandonment, as well as the letter saying that she was running away and not to look for her. In 1983, after Elisabeth begged for an enlargement of the cell, Joseph forced Elisabeth and the children to dig with their bare hands to help him expand another 500 square feet. February 1994, Monica is born, and 10 months later is found at the Fritzls' door in the same manner. This time, Rosemarie received a call where a voice that sounded like Elisabeth asked her to care for Monica, but it's assumed that this was just a recording. After the call, Rosemarie reported it to the police, thinking that it was really strange that Elisabeth somehow knew their new unlisted phone number. In April 1996, Elisabeth gives birth to twin boys, but one of them died shortly after birth. Joseph cremated and disposed of the body. The other, Alexander, was 15 months old when he was left at the door of the Fritzls' house. Joseph and Rosemarie adopted the first of the abandoned children, but the other 2 they took in as foster children. This way they could get money from the government each month for the foster children. They couldn't get that money for adopted children.
So not only was he torturing his daughter and using her for sex, but he was also taking advantage of the government with these children that he was making in this terrible way by basically getting paid to commit these crimes.
Yeah, making a profit.
Yeah. Over the years, social workers had visited the house several times because they had put in these applications for adoption and foster children, but the social workers never saw anything suspicious. And in December of 2002, Felix was born, but Joseph left him in the cellar because his wife was unable to handle any more children. And you can understand why. They already had 6 other children of their own in the house, and then they added another 3. So, and it doesn't sound like Joseph was around that often. So, Rosemarie was probably raising 9 children on her own.
Did we mention how old Elisabeth was when she was put in the cellar, and how old Joseph was?
Do you have those ages? I think we mentioned Elisabeth was 18, but I don't know how old Joseph was.
I guess I don't remember how old he was either. Okay, never mind.
Well, he was born in 1935, and she was put in the cellar in 1980. He was over 50, probably 60.
So they're not spring chickens taking care of these kids.
Later, Elisabeth had reported that Joseph would force her to watch pornographic videos and then force her to reenact the scenes with him in front of the 3 children that still lived with her in the cellar. And she said this was his way of humiliating her, and which I feel like being locked in a cellar already does that well enough. But the cellar ceiling was reportedly no taller than 6 feet at any point. I've seen that it was only 5'6" throughout most of it. And Stefan actually ended up being 5'8", so he had a lot of back problems because of that. Elisabeth taught the children to read and write on her own, so she was a good mother, as good as she could be, even though her father was terrible to her. And sometimes Joseph would shut the lights off or stop bringing food for days at a time to punish them. He also threatened to gas them if they tried to escape, and said they'd get electrocuted if they meddled with the cellar door.
Joseph, according to his sister-in-law, would go into the basement every morning at 9 a.m. to draw plans for machines he sold to firms. He often would stay down there at night and wouldn't allow his wife to bring him coffee. When a neighbor told Joseph he heard noises, he said it was from a gas heating system. There were 8 locked doors between the basement of the house and the cell where Joseph kept Elisabeth. 2 of those doors also had electric locking devices on them. The cell door was protected by an electronic pin and behind a shelf in Fritzl's basement workshop.
So it was pretty well disguised and hidden. Did you want to talk about the layout of their living area?
Sure. It was just a really weird layout. Once you pushed that, I don't know what you call it, a workshop bench or like a bookshelf almost, you'd push it out of the way and there'd be a really small opening or door that you'd have to open.
I kind of picture it as one of those big storage shelves that we have in the basement.
Yeah, a storage shelf. Then you move that over and then you crawl through the small door that was barely 3 feet high and 2 feet wide. And then you go through this little tiny hallway. Then you have the living area, which was a table with 4 chairs, not much else. These hallways were really, really narrow, kind of claustrophobic narrow. And then you keep going from the living area straight and you hit the bathroom, which was a toilet, a sink, a really small shower. Keep going straight again through another hallway and you have a bedroom, and then turn right and there's a hallway and another bedroom. So 2 bedrooms, a really small bathroom, a tiny kitchen and living area. And then there was a padded room off the living area that it's speculated that was used for Joseph to rape Elisabeth and for Elisabeth to give birth, so that it was soundproof, padded room and insulated. So
Ugh. Terrifying. Is there anything else you want to say about her time down there, or should we move on to Joseph's past?
Just the fact that there was really little air in this dungeon. The people or the detectives that went down there after everything blew up had to come out pretty soon after because of the lack of oxygen. So it must have taken a really long time to get used to it, not to mention have a baby after baby down there. There was high humidity, which was hard to live with, really dirty and moldy, and there were rats in there too. So although you look up pictures and it's like decorated, it was pretty terrible.
Yeah, it was no home sweet home for them. And especially for all the kids that were born down there and never in their life got any sunlight, the vitamin D deficiencies. I mean, vitamin D is so important for your bone health and your immune system and just your brain, your overall happiness and mental health. I just can't imagine never seeing the sun in your whole life, especially for this 19-year-old girl. It's amazing that she lived 19 years with no sun.
Mm-hmm.
And that they reported that in the hospital too, that she was closer to death than she was to life. Well, let's talk about Joseph's past. He was born April 9th of 1935 in Amstetten, Austria, to Joseph Sr. and Maria Fritzl. He was an only child, and his father left the family when Joseph was 4 and never contacted him again. And in 1944, Joseph Sr. died in battle in World War II. Fritzl described his mother as the best woman in the world and as strict as necessary. He also said he thought about sleeping with his mom at times.
Nice guy.
Yeah. But later, these are all statements that were taken after he was arrested. Later, he expressed a negative opinion of her and claimed she used to beat me, hit me until I was lying in a pool of blood on the floor, and it left me feeling totally humiliated and weak. My mother was a servant, and she used to work hard all her life. I never had a kiss from her. I was never cuddled, although I wanted it. I wanted her to be good to me. So he had some mommy issues.
Those are pretty far and in between statements.
Yeah, it makes you wonder which one's the truth. Because if at first he said she was the best woman in the world, it almost makes you think he's making up some of this stuff. He claimed that she used to call him a Satan, a criminal, a no good, and he had a horrible fear of her. I think there was also an event where, because they were living in he grew up during a war pretty much. And when other people were going down into the bunkers and basically hiding from the attacks, she didn't want to take the time to go down there, so he was exposed to the attacks that were going on. But I don't know if that's a story from him. I should have looked into that a little more. But Fritzl learned electrical engineering at HTL Tech College and got a job at Velstapine in Linz. Not sure how to pronounce a lot of these words, so sorry about that. In 1956, when he was 21, he married Rosemarie. She was 17. And in 1967, he got into some legal trouble. And this is kind of interesting. He broke into a home in Linz where a 24-year-old nurse lived, and her husband was away. He held a knife to her throat and raped her, and threatened to kill her if she screamed. He was later convicted of rape and served 12 months out of his 18-month sentence. So, how, you may wonder, does someone that was convicted of rape and served prison time end up having 7 children and being able to adopt one and foster 2 others?
Well, in Austria, after 10 years of your crime that you've committed, they completely wipe it from your record, and then no one knows what you did.
Yeah. Just this week, when Generation Y covered, who was that kid's name, that college kid?
Brock something.
Brock Turner. They were talking about how rape, the punishment for rape charges is so just a slap on the wrist compared to drug charges, which for the most part, like Justin said, a drug deal is consensual. The dealer and the buyer are both agreeing to this. In a rape, there's a victim who's not consenting to the act. So why do rape charges carry less weight than drug charges? It's obviously a system that has some work to be done, but thanks to the statute of limitations in Austria, anyway, Josef Fritzl, his record was erased after 10 years, and so when social services was checking him out for this adoption and foster applications, he had no criminal past, even though he had spent a year in prison for a violent rape where he threatened to kill someone if they screamed. So he could have very well ended up being a murderer if that rape didn't go over well. And there was also another time where he attempted to rape someone, but it didn't work out. So it wasn't a one-time offender or a snap. And obviously with what he did in the future, we see that. But people in his town knew him as a well-respected business and family man.
Although strict.
Yeah, very strict, religious. But as we talked about last week, things are not always as they appear on the outside. I wanted to mention one more thing before we move on to the next part, is that Elisabeth, when they were questioning her, she revealed that the sexual abuse started long before she was thrown into the cellar. She was only 11 years old when he started sexually abusing her. So, real fun guy.
I don't know. Some of the websites I looked up said that the trips he'd go on for weeks at a time in Thailand were to sex resorts, where apparently you can do whatever you want. But I don't know how credible they are.
Is that where those videos of him getting massaged by some random woman went
Yeah.
from? Yeah. He seemed to have quite a lust for life that didn't involve his family. The details get a little murky because this was all the span of 70 years, basically, this case was. So we can't really get all the details right. But man, this is a very intense story of sexual abuse, and I don't know. I think the biggest issue here is that rape was removed from his record, and he became a well-respected businessman above suspicion, even though his 18-year-old daughter went missing without a trace, and the only evidence was a note. Although in Austrian law, a person that's over 18 has the full right to disappear, and the police can't legally search for them. So, just a bad combination of laws there between the statute of limitations and that no search law. Because here in the States, I'm pretty sure you can search for someone after 24 hours, or is it 48?
48.
48 hours of disappearance, which in a lot of cases is a good thing. So,
Elizabeth was really shy, and she enjoyed school a lot more than being at home. She also had a boyfriend right before she was missing who said that he noticed something was up when Joseph was trying to tell him that she had disappeared. The father said that she was taking drugs, that she was drinking, and that she joined a sect, and for some reason most of the people around the community bought that story. But at the same time, Elizabeth was known for being kind of a troubled girl and being the troublemaker out of the family. So most people accepted the story, but the boyfriend never felt like that. It never settled with him. He was always confused with that story, but Joseph managed to shut him up every time he was going to say something.
wow. Fritzl gave a few different reasons as to why he ended up throwing his daughter into a cell for 24 years and raping her. His first and foremost reason, he said, was to protect Elizabeth from people of questionable morality. So, how twisted is that? He claimed that his pathological behavior was innate because his mom was abusive and she only gave birth to him to prove she wasn't barren. So he blames it on his mom. He admits that he planned to lock his daughter up even during his prison stint for the earlier rape conviction. So while he was in prison, he claims that that's when he came up with this plan to lock his daughter in the basement, and his reason was so that he could contain and express his evil side. He said, "I was born to rape, and I held myself back for a relatively long time. I could have behaved a lot worse than locking up my daughter." So it was basically saying, I could have done a lot worse things, but all I did was lock up my daughter and rape her. So the forensic psychiatrist diagnosed Fritzl as having a severe combined personality disorder, including borderline schizotypal and schizoid personalities, and a sexual disorder, and recommended Fritzl receive psychiatric care for the rest of his life.
That is such a long time to just plan and build it. It must have taken a few years.
Oh, yeah. And it's reported that his family helped him build it, and they didn't wonder. I mean, he said it was a workshop for his building materials that he sold to firms, but it's so sad and scary to think that Elizabeth helped build the cellar that she would be imprisoned in.
Mm-hmm. And scary to think that there's people out there like that who enjoy watching other people or their kids make their own prison. That he was enjoying every single moment of it.
Yeah.
So he was planning this as early as 1978. It was a long time.
Wow. Was that when he was in prison?
I'm assuming so. That's what I got from the documentary
Okay.
I watched.
Because he committed that rape in 1967.
Okay.
I don't know when he was actually in prison, but was Elizabeth even born yet? Or he just planned to trap one of his future daughters in the... When was Elizabeth born? Let me check. Oh, yeah. I think Elizabeth was born the year before he committed that rape, so... So he targeted her a long time before he actually went through with it.
Elizabeth said that at first when she was locked in this dungeon that she kept her spirits as high as she could. She stated that her father had been abusing her since she was 11, so she wasn't used to all this abuse in the dungeon, but she knew a little bit more than just a random person off the street would know about the situation. But she said that once she was pregnant with her first child, Kirsten, is when her will started to break. And so sad to think about when you're pregnant and you're supposed to be happy and excited about this new person you're bringing into the world. And when she was supposed to be feeling these things, her will was breaking. She was giving up. Like all hope was lost. And to not be able to see sunlight or feel the breeze for that long, just can't imagine the emotional toll it would take on you.
Yeah. And she probably felt really bad for the kids that she was bringing in the world because the horrible conditions that they would have to live in. And she was probably, in a case of Stockholm Syndrome, grateful that Joseph put 3 of the children up in the real world. And
Grateful or terrified. She didn't know what he was going to do to him.
oh, true.
She did try to make it homey and cozy in the dungeon or apartment or whatever you want to call it. She even painted little sea creatures, snails, turtles, octopus in the bathroom on the tiles. Just trying to do anything she could to make it more cheery for her kids. And sadly, since this was all her kids really knew, other than watching TV, which they had, I think, 2 of them, this was their life. So they probably just tried to make the best of their surroundings.
Yeah. She did a lot better than I would have done in this situation. I mean, teaching her kids to read and kind of giving them some kind of structure in their life, that's really commendable.
The children in the cellar, they knew that they had siblings upstairs that were able to run around and go outside, but the children upstairs weren't aware of their cellar siblings. And Joseph would bring home videos of what normal life was like upstairs for them to see, which I think, I don't know if that's nice, if it's a gift, or if it's just cruel, because how jealous would you feel
Yeah.
if you were one of the cellar kids?
You can't miss something you never had, but once you see that, that's almost torture in itself.
Joseph would drive far out of town for supplies and food, clothes, toys to bring back to them, and he'd bring them at night. He really covered his tracks because he went out very late to places that he knew neighbors wouldn't find him. And then for some reason, Rosemarie, she never wondered what was going on when he would stay in the basement for so long. I want to talk about a little bit about Rosemarie and how could she not notice what was happening? I kind of wonder if she had any clue with the strange clues of these babies at the doorstep, these notes that apparently only Joseph would receive from his daughter and not her. Her daughter being missing for so long and not telling her mother. All the communication that supposedly Elisabeth was giving was going through her father, not the mom. So I do wonder, although Rosemarie, she had the reputation of being a really good mom to these children that weren't actually hers, I wonder how she couldn't notice anything that was going on.
Yeah. Well, it seems like she was really subjected to, because during that time period in Austria especially, it was very much the domineering husband role and the submissive wife role, and whatever he did on his own time was his business and none of her business. And thankfully that has changed, but I kind of feel like she didn't know what was going on because she was afraid of him. He probably reacted violently if she did question him about it. And she also called the police when she got that phone call about the second child because she was wondering how Elisabeth would have gotten that unlisted phone number.
True.
So I don't think she had a clue.
Also, throughout the 24 years of her imprisonment, the Fritzl family rented out rooms. Over 110 tenants rented those rooms in the home, and none of them claimed to have heard or seen anything.
Oh, wow.
When Elisabeth was found, or when she reported what had happened to her, she was 42 years old. She looked really rough. She had a really crudely cut haircut. I mean, she's not going to go to the salon. Her hair was completely white. At 42, your hair doesn't usually turn white, so I'm thinking that's from the lack of vitamin D.
Oh, yeah.
She had shrunken lips, around toothless gums. She had a really deeply lined, wrinkly face. She was painfully thin, and she had almost transparent skin. So she wasn't looking very good.
This freaking... I can't say the words that I'm thinking of right now, but he stole the best years of this girl's life. I mean, she just turned 18. That's the time where you have your freedom and you're still young. From 18 to 40, I mean, that's when the world is your oyster, whatever that means, and and you're young and you're able to do stuff. You're able to go explore the world and do what basically try to achieve your dreams. And he threw her in a cellar, and she became an old lady. She went from a beautiful teenager to an old lady in this cellar. And he stole her life away from her. And now she got out when she was 42, and she looked like she was 60. I mean, it's beyond sad. It's just horrifying.
The forensic psychiatrist that met with her said that she had been destroyed by all means, quote unquote. So her will to live was pretty low. But having all her kids with her after she was out from this terrifying life, it really helped her.
So in the trial, Joseph's defense came up with this bullcrap. Let me see, basically they said he's not the monster that you're portraying him out to be.
Yeah, one of the attorneys said, the media made him look like such a monster. We're trying to take the monster out of the man and just make the jury see him for the man he is, not the monster.
Yeah, exactly. Here's their evidence of this. He had brought a Christmas tree down to his captives in the cellar during the holiday season. That's how they prove that he's not a monster. I'm like, big freaking whoop. Who cares? If anything, that's just to get them to stop complaining, maybe, or I don't know what, but that is no defense for a person that 24, I mean, how many years is it from 11 to 18? 7 years. So add another 7 years onto that 24, because that's when he started abusing her. That's 31 years of abuse. And he thinks that bringing a Christmas tree down during the holiday season is a good defense for that. And his lawyers, they didn't have much to work with. I'll give him that.
Well, thankfully, when Fritzl was 82, he was jailed for life, and this was in 2009. He was found guilty for the murder of one of the babies, incest, and 3,000 counts of rape.
Jeez.
So, although he's super old and he's only going to live, not even 20 more years, unless he's a Superman, this really doesn't seem just, but it's the best that they can do. He still hopes to be free someday. He has dreams of walking out and fishing, he said.
It'll be when he's dead.
I don't know how. I don't know how he thinks he's going to get out.
No. During the trial, the prosecution, they made a mark on the door of the courtroom, the height of the ceiling in the cellar. It was 5 foot 8.5 inches where they put the mark. I'm guessing that was the average height to show them.
How cramped it was.
I'm a short guy. I'm 5'10", and I would hit my head on the ceiling of this place. I can't imagine how claustrophobic it would be. Mm-hmm. And it was also damp and moldy because there's no ventilation. There were no windows. It was sealed off. Mm-hmm. And there were 11 hours of testimony recorded by Elisabeth in sessions with police and psychologists that the jurors had to watch through. 11 hours. I mean, that's a lot of stuff she had to say.
And poor Elisabeth, when she first got to the hospital and the police tried questioning her and asking her if she was okay, she just didn't want to say anything. She thought they wouldn't believe him because what kind of father could do that to their own daughter? So it took a couple of hours for her to finally get it out, what was really going on.
Yeah, and after she made them promise that she'd never have to see her father again, the tape with all of her testimony on it was described to be so harrowing that the 8 jurors, they couldn't watch more than 2 hours of it at a time. I mean, I can't imagine how depressing that would be especially for Elisabeth. She's the one that had to live it for 24 years. And if the jurors can't even make it through more than 2 hours at a time of hearing her story.
Although I don't agree with the way Austria does the after 10 years, we're going to wipe your record clean, I have to give them mad props because now Elizabeth is living with her 6 kids. They all have new identities and they live in a secret location in Austria. Nobody knows still where they're at, and they have a really good amount of privacy and security. Also, ever since that she's been out of the dungeon, there have been no interviews from her or from her kids, which I don't think she really wants to, and it's nice that they're not pushing for them.
Yeah.
When she first got out, they were brought to a psychiatric hospital. Rosemary also went with the other children, and the clinic had to build a special dark enclosure for them just to get adjusted to the light and the life outside of this dungeon.
Oh, how sad. And I read that normal everyday occurrences like dimming the lights or closing doors plunged Kirsten and Stefan into anxiety and panic attacks. So I can imagine the level of emotional and mental damage that they've done, and physical. And while they're in captivity, I mean, these kids weren't just living down there all fine. Kirsten would often tear her hair out in clumps, and she would shred her dresses and stuff them in the toilet. And Stefan couldn't walk properly because he was 5'8" and the ceilings were shorter than that. So he was always constantly stooping whenever he was standing up, and that led to him having some physical issues.
Some of the psychiatric doctors, though, they said that for what Elizabeth had to work with, she was a really, really good mom, and the kids had really good manners and were very polite. So even though they were really messed up, they were polite.
Yeah, we talk about people that have had it way less horrifying than this, committing terrible crimes. So this just shows that, like in the case of Mary Bell, I don't know what else Gypsy would have done, but at least in the case of Mary Bell, this kind of treatment never justifies a murder or becoming a murderer of other people that had nothing to do with your abuse. Because just because you had a rough childhood, these kids seem to be doing fine, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't get much worse than this.
The first thing I think of, if I was able to get out of this pretty much a closet in the basement, is I would be so excited to walk in the grass and see the stars and the moon and feel the breeze on my face, and maybe touch leaves on a tree. But I wonder if these experiences were almost scary to these children because they had no idea all these different sensory things and these small motor skills that they really weren't able to develop. If these were all things they had to adjust to slowly, if it was really overwhelming to them, or if it was just exciting and mesmerizing the first time to enjoy these things.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about. I guess we'll never really know, but...
Yeah, you can't find pictures of Elizabeth or her kids. You won't find interviews, like I said before, and you'll never know where they live. So all we can really do is hope that they're doing well.
Yeah, you can find pictures of Joseph. He looks scary. He's got those eyebrows like
He literally looks like he's a rapist. He just looks creepy.
Yeah, but he's got eyebrows like that actor that I can't remember.
You can also find videos of him in a Speedo in Thailand.
Yes, you can. Peter Gallagher eyebrows, man. Look at this. Josef Fritzl basically looks like a dinosaur version of Peter Gallagher. Except, sorry, Peter Gallagher, nothing.
Yeah, that was mean.
It's not like he's going to hear this, so.
Cutting that part out. I guess the last thing I want to say about this case, you can't really say the if you see something, say something line, because nobody had anything to see, apparently. It was so well hidden. But I think this case, looking back on it, it's more about being really grateful and thankful for the things that you have. And taking a moment to enjoy the little things. Being able to go outside and take a walk and hear the birds sing, those are things that could be taken away in the snap of a finger. You could just be chloroformed or shoved in a room. You just don't know. So I think it's really important just to take a step back and enjoy the little things.
Yeah, and appreciate being raised in a normal environment with sunlight. And I mean, I even said this last week with Gypsy being force-fed all those medications and pills and getting her salivary glands removed, and I mean, so many things that ruin her experience of life. And these kids are no exception. I mean, they weren't able to develop properly. So, one more thing. Josef Fritzl has officially changed his name to Josef Meyerhoff as of May 2017. So,
Why?
well, I'm guessing because he's famous as a piece of crap, so he wants a different name. But just know that Josef Meyerhoff cannot be trusted. All right. Well, thanks for listening to this episode. Do you have anything else to say, babe?
Well, it was a really dreary episode, but they're not going to get much happier, so
Yeah.
get used to it. Also, if your dad's not raping you, then you've got it pretty good. So
Yeah. Well, man, nothing I hear surprises me anymore, and I never realized how many different forms of abuse there could be. I mean, we've covered 4 cases, and all of them have been parents abusing their children, but they've all been extremely different.
Well, next week we're going to change it up a little bit, and instead of parents, well, I guess it still could be parents, but we're going to talk about human sex trafficking. It's something that I've always been really interested in and learning about and telling other people about because it's just not talked about enough to make a difference.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how much information and how much of it is going on right now that the police can't stop because it's so underground, it's so secret the way they have their system set up. I wouldn't be surprised if we have at least 5 episodes on this topic throughout this podcast. There might be even more because there's so many cases to cover and just statistics and
It's hidden, but it's hidden in plain sight, so it'll be a really interesting topic to talk about.
yeah, well, and backpage.com or whatever it was.
And we'll also talk about signs that you can look for to see if any of your loved ones might be involved with human sex trafficking or just people in general and what you can do to help them.
Yeah. I'd also like to give a hand to Chris Hansen because he's done so much good work in his field in the media for just raising awareness of these type of things, like To Catch a Predator and this trafficking thing, because I'm pretty sure we saw it on, is it 2020
What?
that Chris Harrison's on? No,
that's a different
not
show.
Chris Harrison. He's from The Bachelor. Chris Hansen. Let's make that clear. So anyway, thanks so much for listening. If you made it this far, obviously you did because you're hearing this. So be sure to subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app if you enjoy this. And there will be many more episodes to come. We plan on releasing one every Tuesday around the evening time. So if you'd like to support us financially, we would really appreciate it. Visit our Patreon page, patreon.com/VOV podcast, and that'll be linked in the show notes. And if you have any cases you'd like us to cover, email us at vovpodcast@gmail.com. That's V-O Victor Octopus Victor podcast@gmail.com. And also, if you have any stories of your own that you'd like to share with us, feel free to email us there. Or if you'd like to share your story on the podcast, we'd love to interview you or just share your story that you've transcribed for us. So thanks again for listening, and
Go make some popcorn and pop on How to Catch a Predator. Take your mind off all this gloom and watch some funny gloom.
Yeah. There's nothing like seeing Chris Hansen say, "Why don't you have a seat?"
What were your intentions tonight with the guy with his pants off?
Yeah. That naked priest guy. Yeah, anyway, if you haven't seen To Catch a Predator, go check it out. And apparently we're doing shout outs at the end of every episode now for shows that we like, so. Okay, well, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.